The first sound I heard in weeks was my son Kevin's voice. "She's sitting on over 2 million, plus this house is worth at least 800,000, he said, his voice tinged with a mix of greed and excitement. His wife, Amber, replied, her words chilling. "And she's completely deaf, so we can plan right in front of her stupid face." I had been pretending to still be deaf for 2 whole days, waiting for the right moment to strike. What I heard next would change everything. Let me introduce myself. I'm Margaret Stone, 71 years old, and I used to be a piano teacher. For years, my home was filled with the sound of children's laughter as they played my old grand piano. But now, the house on Maple Street was quiet, just like the silence that had fallen over me after my accident. 5 years ago, my husband Robert passed away. Since then, the loneliness in the house had grown unbearable. Kevin, my only son, was my comfort, though I couldn't say the same about his wife, Amber. But I tried to accept her, welcoming her into the family like the daughter I never had. But all of that changed on a Tuesday afternoon in October. I was carrying laundry upstairs when my slipper caught on the carpet, and I fell. It felt like the world slowed down as I tumbled down the hardwood stairs, the crack of my head hitting the banister echoing in the stillness before everything went dark. When I woke up, I was in the hospital, and Kevin's worried face hovered above me. "Mom, can you hear me?" he asked, his lips moving slowly. But I couldn't hear him. The world had gone silent. The doctors confirmed the worst. My head injury had caused swelling around my auditory nerve. The damage was severe, and while I might recover some of my hearing, it was just as likely that I wouldn't. The fall changed everything. I was no longer the woman I used to be. Kevin, ever the devoted son, insisted that Amber and he move into my house to take care of me. For the first 2 weeks, they were perfect. Kevin would sit with me in the evenings, showing me old family photos, and Amber would cook my favorite meals, always patient, always kind. But I was blind to the truth. They weren't just helping me. They were waiting for me to die quietly so they could inherit everything. I caught them whispering to each other from time to time, but I convinced myself it was nothing. After all, why would my own son and daughter-in-law be scheming behind my back? Then, it all changed. One day I sat in my recliner pretending to nap. My hearing had started to come back in tiny trickles, whispers of sound I hadn't heard in weeks. Kevin and Amber came into the room speaking softly. "How much longer do we have to keep up this act?" Amber's voice was sharp, irritated. Kevin responded, "Just until we figure out the next step. But honestly, this might work out better than I thought." My heart pounded in my chest. What did he mean? He continued, "She trusts us completely. We have access to everything. The house, the money, all of it." I froze, my breath steady, but inside I felt like my entire world was crumbling. Kevin was talking about me as if I was a lifeless object. "She's got more money than I realized. Over 2 million in savings, plus stocks, bonds, and retirement accounts." Amber's voice rose with excitement. "Seriously, that's insane." "Yeah," Kevin said. "We can move her to a care facility, get her to sign some papers. We can sell the house and we'll have full access to everything." My stomach twisted in knots. They weren't just planning to steal from me, they were planning to dispose of me. And Amber, she was already researching how to take complete control. "Once she's in a facility, we can handle everything for her. Her finances, her medications, her future," Amber said, her voice oozing with false sweetness. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were planning to move me out, control my money, and eventually kill me to inherit everything. But they underestimated one thing: me. I wasn't as helpless as they thought. They'd made their first mistake by assuming I wouldn't fight back. Now, it was my turn to show them just how wrong they were. The next few days felt like a surreal dream. I kept up the act, pretending to be completely deaf, still struggling to understand how far Kevin and Amber had gone in their betrayal. But every word they spoke, every move they made, I heard it all. It was maddening. Their voices, dripping with fake concern, all the while scheming about how to steal everything I'd worked for. It took everything in me to stay calm. I spent my time carefully observing their every move. Kevin, always the dutiful son in appearance, kept writing me notes on a notepad, pretending to communicate as if I could no longer hear his words. Amber was overly attentive, almost smothering, trying to make me feel dependent on her. I could see the glint in her eyes, the same glint that I had once mistaken for kindness, but was now filled with cold calculation. Then came the day when they started discussing the logistics of their plan more openly. Amber was in the kitchen, pulling out ingredients to make dinner, and Kevin sat at the table, flicking through his phone. I was sitting in the living room pretending to read a book, but I wasn't reading. I was listening. "I spoke to Jake again today," Kevin said, his voice casual, as if he was talking about something trivial. "He's got the appraisal for the house set up. In this market, we could sell it for around 800,000, maybe more with some staging. The important thing is getting the paperwork done quickly, so we don't lose any time." Amber, poring over a cookbook, replied without turning to him, "And once we get the house sold, we move her into Sunset Manor. That'll give us complete control over her finances and medical care. The best part is, we can handle all her assets and she'll never know the difference." I felt the sting in my chest as I listened. My home, my memories, being discussed as though they were nothing more than assets to be liquidated. Kevin, my own son, treating everything I've worked for as a means to an end. I had to act fast. They were already putting their plan into motion. The next day, Kevin and Amber left for errands, and I moved quickly. I'd already contacted Harrison Webb, the lawyer who'd handled Robert's estate, and arranged a secret meeting. When Harrison arrived at the house the following morning, I let him in as quietly as possible, making sure no one would see. He was stunned to see me sitting in my recliner, not the frail, confused woman they had imagined. "Margaret, you can hear me," he said, his eyes wide in disbelief. "Yes, and that's the problem," I replied, my voice steady. I explained everything, their conversations, the way they had manipulated me into believing they cared when, in reality, they had been planning my demise. Harrison's expression grew darker with each word. "This is elder abuse and financial exploitation on a scale I've never seen," he said, his voice grim. "But we need evidence. You can't just go to the police without something solid." "I know," I replied. "I've been thinking ahead." I had already set a plan in motion. We spent the next hour drafting a new will, one that would leave everything, my house, my investments, all of it, to charity. Kevin would inherit exactly $1 and a note explaining that he deserved nothing more. It was harsh but necessary. "I'm doing this because I want to protect myself and everything I've worked for," I said as I signed the documents. "Kevin and Amber won't get away with this." Harrison nodded, clearly impressed by the clarity in my resolve. "You're doing the right thing, Margaret, but we need to gather more evidence. Do you have a plan?" "I do," I replied, smiling faintly. "I'm going to let them think they're still in control. I want them to show their true colors." That afternoon, I called Joe Martinez, the owner of a local security company, and asked him to come over. I explained everything to him, my suspicions, my fears, and the betrayal I was facing. "Mrs. Stone," he said, his voice serious, "I can install cameras for you, small ones with excellent audio. We'll make sure we get everything they say and do, so you have the proof you need." Within hours, Joe had installed tiny cameras in my living room, kitchen, and hallway, all connected to a cloud server that only I could access. The moment I had the evidence, I could stop them for good. It wasn't long before I got what I needed. 3 days later, I heard Kevin and Amber talking again. They thought I was asleep, but I wasn't. I was listening carefully to every word, every detail. "Once we get her in Sunset Manor," Amber said, We'll be in complete control of her money. We can sell everything, liquidate it all, and she won't even know. She'll be so out of it by then that she'll just sign whatever we put in front of her." Kevin laughed, low and cruel. "She trusts me completely. It'll be easy. I'll tell her it's for her own good and she'll sign anything. Once we get the power of attorney, we can move fast. The house, the savings, everything's ours." Amber hesitated. "But what if she starts asking questions? You know she's not stupid." Kevin was confident, his voice dripping with entitlement. "She won't. She's already in too deep. She'll never know what hit her. They were planning to poison me to make it look like a natural death, to use my age and my injury against me. They thought they had me trapped. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. I had everything I needed. The new will, the recordings, the cameras. They had no idea they were being watched. The morning after I received the recordings, I felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. Kevin and Amber had no idea they were being watched. They thought they had me in the palm of their hands, that I was just an old woman they could manipulate. But they were wrong. As I sat in my living room, replaying their conversations over and over again, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of rage. They thought they could poison me, steal my life's work, and cast me aside like trash. It hurt more than I cared to admit. How quickly my son, the one I raised and loved, could betray me for money. But I pushed that aside. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to be their victim. The next day, I prepared for the final act. I'd contacted Detective Rodriguez earlier that morning and briefed him on the situation. He was as appalled as I was, and he understood how important it was to make sure this went smoothly. I couldn't just confront them blindly. No, I needed them to dig their own graves, to expose themselves fully. I acted as I had been, frail, confused, a shadow of the woman I once was. Kevin and Amber had no reason to suspect anything had changed. They continued their charade, feeding me lies and playing the role of the doting children they thought I wanted. Amber brought me my medications that morning, just like she always did. She placed the pills in front of me and watched closely, a smile on her face as if she were a nurse tending to a helpless patient. "Here, Margaret," she said, exaggerating the motion of her lips so I could follow. "Your blood pressure pills. Just take these and you'll feel better, okay?" I nodded, pretending to be dazed. As I picked up the pills, I carefully palmed the 2 unfamiliar white tablets they had been slipping into my medication. I'd been inspecting them over the past few days, and I knew they weren't prescribed to me. They were part of their plan. "Thank you, Amber," I said weakly, my voice soft, barely above a whisper. Kevin was watching, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone. They thought I couldn't hear, but I was listening intently, every word sinking deeper into my heart. At 2:00 p.m., when I knew they'd be out running errands, I was ready. I had called Harrison Webb, my lawyer, and asked him to meet me at the house. I also contacted Detective Rodriguez, who had promised to help me. They didn't know it yet, but the end of their scheme was coming faster than they could imagine. When Harrison arrived, he looked at me with a mixture of concern and admiration. He had no idea I was playing my part. "Margaret," he said, his voice gentle, "I can't believe you're hearing again. This is incredible." "Yes," I replied, looking him in the eye, "and I need your help. They're planning to take everything from me. I have the recordings. I have the proof." I showed him the audio files from the hidden cameras, each one confirming their conspiracy to steal my money, put me in a facility, and eventually kill me for my inheritance. Harrison's face grew pale as he listened to the evidence, but his determination soon kicked in. "We're going to stop them, Margaret," he said. "But we need to be careful. Let's do this the right way." The plan was simple but effective. Detective Rodriguez was going to be hidden in the kitchen while the rest of us waited for Kevin and Amber to return. I'd make sure they showed their true colors one last time. I had already made arrangements with Joe Martinez, who had installed the cameras. The evidence was clear. The recordings, the pills, the power of attorney they were trying to push onto me. Everything was in place. As the clock ticked closer to their return, my nerves steadied. This was it. I was about to take back control, to expose Kevin and Amber for who they truly were. When they walked through the door, acting as if everything was normal, I greeted them with a fake smile, just as I had been doing for the past few weeks. "Hi, Mom," Kevin said, his voice dripping with sweetness. "We've been looking at some places for you. Sunset Manor has an opening next month. We just need you to sign a few papers." Amber stood next to him, holding a folder full of documents. "Everything's going to be so much easier for you there," she added, her tone still the same fake warmth. I looked down at the papers, pretending to be uncertain. I acted as though I didn't know what they were trying to do. "What's this?" I asked, trying to sound weak. "More paperwork." Kevin sat down next to me, guiding my hand toward the papers. "Just a couple of things to make sure you're taken care of, Mom. We'll manage everything for you, your finances, your care. You don't need to worry about a thing." I took the pen from the table and hesitated. Then, in a slow, deliberate motion, I signed both documents just as I had done before. They were convinced they had me, but they didn't know I had a plan. Just as Kevin and Amber started celebrating their success, I stood up slowly, a smile playing at the corners of my lips. "Actually," I said, "I think we need to discuss something more important." Before they could react, Detective Rodriguez stepped forward, his badge clearly visible. "Kevin Thornfield, Amber Thornfield, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, financial exploitation, and attempted poisoning." The room went deathly silent. Kevin's face drained of color as he looked at me in disbelief. "Mom, you—" "No," I cut him off, my voice steady. "You didn't think I could hear, but I've been listening. I heard everything." I turned to Amber, whose expression was twisted in panic. "You both thought I was just a helpless old woman, but you were wrong." Rodriguez moved in as the backup officers entered the room to cuff them. "You're not getting away with this," I said quietly. As Kevin and Amber were led away, I felt a strange sense of peace. They had underestimated me, but now the tables had turned. I had won. I had protected myself, my legacy, and my dignity. The house was eerily quiet as I sat alone in my living room, the weight of the day finally settling on my shoulders. I had done it. I had faced the people who were supposed to love and protect me, the people I had trusted with my life, and I had exposed them for who they truly were. But while the relief of victory washed over me, it didn't erase the pain. My own son, the child I had nurtured, had tried to end my life for money. I should have been angry, furious even, but instead, I felt an odd sense of calm. I had spent too many years trying to please people who never deserved my love. But now, the truth had set me free. By the time the trial began, the shock of what had happened was still reverberating through the community. Kevin and Amber's plot to steal my life's work, to push me into a nursing home and manipulate me into signing over my inheritance, was laid bare for all to see. The recordings, the pills, the hidden cameras, everything had been documented. There was no doubt in anyone's mind. The courtroom was packed with reporters, lawyers, and spectators, but none of it mattered to me. I didn't care about the spectacle. I cared about the justice that would be served and about making sure they never had a chance to hurt anyone again. As I walked into the courtroom with Harrison by my side, I held my head high. Despite everything, I was proud of the woman I had become. The jury was already seated, and I could feel the weight of their gazes. They were there to see the truth, just as I had witnessed it. It wasn't just about punishment. It was about making sure my story was heard, and that no one would ever dare to do what Kevin and Amber had done. The trial unfolded exactly as I expected. Kevin, who had once been so confident in his manipulation, crumbled under the weight of the evidence. The recordings were played, and his face twisted in horror as he listened to himself discuss my death so casually. Amber, on the other hand, tried to maintain her composure, but her desperation was evident. Her background in nursing only made her actions more sinister in the eyes of the jury. The prosecutor painted a chilling picture of what they had planned, poisoning me with unmarked pills, slowly slipping them into my medication, and making it look like a natural death. The defense tried to argue that Kevin was a stressed caregiver, that Amber had acted out of a misguided sense of love, but their arguments didn't hold up. The proof was undeniable. When I took the stand, I wasn't just a victim, I was a survivor. I spoke calmly, answering the prosecutor's questions with clarity and conviction. I told them about the son I had once known, the son who had come to me for advice, for comfort, and then turned on me for money. I explained how Amber had wormed her way into our lives, pretending to care for me when in reality she was plotting my murder. "Did you ever suspect that Kevin might harm you?" the prosecutor asked. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I loved him completely. I trusted him with my life." The jury seemed stunned by my sincerity, the depth of the betrayal, and when the verdict came back, it was everything I had hoped for, guilty on all counts. Kevin was sentenced to 15 years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, financial exploitation, and attempted poisoning. Amber received 12 years, though her sentence was slightly reduced for cooperation during the investigation. But no amount of time would ever be enough to erase the damage they had caused. It didn't end there, though. The real aftermath was more personal. Kevin sent me a letter from prison about a month later. I had received letters from him before, but I'd never opened them. This time, though, something made me pause. I sat down on my sun porch, the letter in front of me, and read it through. "Mom," it began. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not just sorry I got caught, but sorry for what I planned to do to you." The letter went on for pages, detailing his remorse, his therapy sessions, and how he had found religion. He asked for forgiveness, though he didn't expect it. I folded the letter slowly. I felt a pang of something. Was it sympathy? No. I felt sorry for the man he had become, but I was also grateful I had stopped him before it was too late. I didn't need to forgive him to move on. What mattered now was that I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my future. In the months that followed, my life began to take on a new rhythm. I sold the house on Maple Street, the house where so many painful memories had been made. I bought a smaller place, a cozy home with a garden and a sunroom perfect for my piano. I didn't need a mansion to prove I was successful or worthy of love. What I had was a life full of meaning. I started teaching piano again, but this time, it wasn't for money. It was for the joy of sharing music with children who reminded me why life was worth living. I found fulfillment in teaching, in helping others discover their talents. And the joy I found in playing, in creating, was something I hadn't known I had been missing. The Gonzalez family next door had become my chosen family. Their children, Isabella, Carlos, and Maria, brought life into my home. They treated me with the respect and kindness I had always hoped for from my biological family. When Isabella played her first piano solo at my recital, I was so proud I could hardly hold back the tears. This was the family I had built, the family who had chosen me. Detective Rodriguez and his wife, Harrison, and even Joe Martinez, all of them became part of my circle. My neighbors, my friends, the people who saw me for who I truly was, not as a source of money, but as a person worthy of love and care. The anniversary of my accident came around, and I decided to throw a party, not to commemorate the fall, but to celebrate survival, growth, and the community I had built. The Gonzalez family decorated my house with flowers and balloons. Maria cooked, Carlos played with the kids, and Isabella performed a beautiful solo on the piano. It felt like a real family celebration, one I had been longing for. As I looked around my home, full of people who genuinely cared for me, I realized something. The best revenge was living well. They had tried to break me, to erase me, but instead they had given me the gift of discovering my own strength. The next day I received another letter, this time from Amber. It was shorter, angrier. She blamed me for everything, claiming that I had tricked them. But that letter, too, went into the fire without a second thought. I had no regrets about what I had done. It was necessary. It had been a hard lesson, but one that I had learned well. As I sat at my piano that evening, with Isabella playing beside me, I realized how much I had gained in the past year. Love, friendship, respect, all things that Kevin and Amber had never understood. I played a soft melody, the music filling the room, and for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. Life after the trial had become a bittersweet symphony, and I was finally starting to play the melody that felt right. It had taken years of heartache, but what I had learned in the process was priceless. I'd rebuilt my life with people who actually cared for me, not for my money, not for what I could give them, but for the person I was. And that was a gift I never would have realized had Kevin and Amber not shown their true colors. 3 months after the trial, I was settling into my new home, a place that was small enough to feel cozy but big enough for my piano, my books, and the peace I so desperately needed. The sunroom, where I spent most of my time now, had become my sanctuary. It was where I played my piano, where I read the letters from my former students, and where I began to dream again. Isabella and her brothers came over most afternoons after school, bringing their homework and their laughter. They loved the sound of the piano, and every time one of them learned a new piece, I could feel a quiet pride growing in me. Teaching wasn't just about music. It was about passing on something intangible, confidence, courage, and the joy of creation. I'd started a small music fund for local schools, offering free lessons to kids who couldn't afford private tutors. My first student, Isabella, had become something of a local legend, and I couldn't help but smile every time someone mentioned how proud they were of her. The Gonzalez family had become my anchor in a way I hadn't anticipated. They were the family I had chosen, and they had proven to be everything I needed. As I sat in my sunroom one bright afternoon, I received a letter. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Kevin. The urge to rip it up instantly was strong, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it slowly and began to read. The letter was filled with apologies, regrets, and a lengthy explanation of how prison had changed him. He spoke about finding faith, attending therapy, and how he had been a victim of his own greed. He didn't expect forgiveness, but asked for a visit, wanting to explain himself in person. I closed the letter and sat for a while in silence. The son I had raised, the one I had loved so fiercely, was gone. In his place was a man who had made unthinkable choices, and now he was asking for forgiveness. But the truth was, I had already forgiven him. I hadn't forgiven his actions, but I had forgiven the little boy I once knew. The reality was that I didn't miss him. Certainly not the person he had become. 2 weeks later, another letter arrived, this one from Amber. It was shorter, angrier, and laced with blame. She claimed that everything had been my fault, that I had manipulated them with my fake deafness, and that her actions were only a result of my betrayal. I didn't even bother reading the rest of it. It wasn't worth my time. Her anger was nothing but an echo of the greed she tried to bury beneath the surface. I burned the letter along with Kevin's, watching the flames consume their words. They were nothing now, just ashes. The next few months passed peacefully. My days were filled with music, community events, and visits from people who truly cared about me. Detective Rodriguez had become a close friend, and he and his wife would often come over for dinner. I found myself enjoying their company more than I ever thought possible. My small home was always full of laughter, Sometimes from the Gonzalez kids, other times from neighbors who dropped by for impromptu gatherings. I'd begun living again, truly living in a way I never had before. I wasn't just existing anymore. I was thriving. One afternoon, as I was playing a piece by Chopin in my sunroom, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I paused the music and went to answer it. To my surprise, it was Harrison, my lawyer. "I thought you might like to know," he said with a serious look on his face, "that Kevin has been accepted into a rehabilitation program. He's working on himself. I know you've heard his apology, but I just wanted to give you the heads up." I nodded, absorbing the news. I didn't know what to feel. Was this an attempt to gain sympathy, or was it genuine change? I couldn't tell. "Thank you, Harrison," I said quietly. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust him again, but I'm glad he's getting the help he needs." We stood there for a moment in silence, and then he added, "I know you're getting on with your life, Margaret, but I thought you'd want to hear it from me." "Thank you," I repeated. "But right now, my focus is on the people who have been here for me, and that's more than enough." Later that evening, I sat in the backyard, watching the sun set. I could hear the kids playing next door, their voices carrying through the warm evening air. It wasn't perfect, but it was close. The pain from the past few years still lingered, but it had softened like a scar that, while still there, no longer ached every time it was touched. As I sat there, I felt a deep sense of peace. Kevin and Amber's betrayal had forced me to confront the deepest parts of myself. It had forced me to face my own vulnerabilities, but it had also given me the strength to rebuild. The family I had once known, the life I had once thought was secure, had shattered. But what had risen from the ashes was something stronger, something more real. I was no longer a woman defined by her relationship to others or the roles she had played for so long. I was Margaret Thornfield, a survivor, a teacher, and a woman who had learned to live for herself. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. The emotional core of the story remains intact. A mother grappling with the betrayal of her son, the legacy of her late husband, and the ultimate redemption of a son who must prove his worth. The family dynamic, trust, and the balance between modern ambition and traditional values are key elements of this narrative.